Welcome back to Raised by Giants. I'm your host, Ryder Lee. We have a fascinating topic and guest with us here today about how fake our history is with Jay Weidner. If you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, or if you're watching the replay, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. All of my social media links are in the description. That's a great way to stay connected. Also, links to watch my documentaries, JFKX and A Clockwork Shining, on Amazon Prime and Tubi are also in the description. I'm still working on my latest documentary, Psychic Agent. It's a doozy of a film that's covering all of the government's psychic spy programs and the gate programs. But stay patient. It'll come when it comes. In other news, I am proud to announce that Raised by Giants is now on the Ground Zero Plus radio network with Clyde Lewis and a really great lineup of other hosts, including friend of the show, Ryan Gable of The Secret Teachings. You can catch my show, Raised by Giants, on the Ground Zero Plus radio network from 11:30 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, PT time, and 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Saturday, PT. That's the Ground Zero Plus radio network. You can listen to Raised by Giants as well as many other great shows. It's wonderful to be working with the legendary Clyde Lewis and his team with the Ground Zero Plus radio network. It's truly an honor and a privilege. I have the link in the description for the Ground Zero Plus radio network that you can listen to anytime. With that down, we have with us today a warm welcome back to the show, author, filmmaker, writer, producer, and star of our documentaries, A Clockwork Shining, Kubrick's Odyssey 3 on Amazon Prime, and JFKX, Solving the Crime of the Century on Amazon Prime and Tubi as well. Jay Weidner, welcome back to the show.
Hey, it's good to be back. How are you?
Doing great. Cut my finger last night watching the Super Bowl, making dinner. It's got to heal up a little bit. I got like 3 or 4 Band-Aids on it. It hurt pretty bad. It was pretty deep, but it'll survive, I think.
Yeah, I did that here about 3 months ago, chopped off the top of this finger while making dinner, and it's still numb all through the top here. So even though it's 3 months later, I've still got no nerve in that area.
Yeah, it hurt pretty bad, and I managed to stop the bleeding, but when I woke up this morning and I was editing a video, I was like, oh no, my thumb, it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's
So I
tough.
got the Band-Aid on it.
Tough to be an editor and not be able to use all 10 fingers.
Yeah, it sucks. But before we get into the main topic of today, which is, history and how it's pretty much a fraud, I think the more that you look into history, you realize that things just aren't lining up. But I also wanted to talk about the Super Bowl halftime show because I believe that this is quite possibly the most cryptic and symbolic halftime performance yet. And it's all in the name, Bad Bunny. He comes out, he's wearing an all white, like a Messiah, follow the white rabbit, Alice in Wonderland symbolism, the Matrix. They had red and blue boxers depicting fighting each other, which is both political parties fighting with each other. He flashes the same types of hand signals that everyone during the halftime shows does. Beyonce, Lady Gaga, Rihanna, they all did it. And we have these people dancing around Bad Bunny here, which is forming a star, which is the star. It's a 6-pointed star. It's the Star of David on top of this shack. There's also a square in the center, which represents the black cube or the black cube of Saturn, which the cube is also within the Star of David, also known as Metatron's cube. The center star is also a hidden point, which is the hidden level of the Kabbalah or the hidden tree of knowledge. So Bad Bunny falls through the hidden point of the star, which is in the center, right through the black cube. He falls down to earth, the fallen angels, down the rabbit hole. And then we get the performance with Lady Gaga singing a song called Die with a Smile. Okay. And then next we have these telephone poles, which Jay, I'm pretty sure you'll know about this. There's these 3 telephone poles, and I believe that these 3 telephone poles represent the 3 pillars of enlightenment in Freemasonry, which is wisdom, strength, and beauty. And all the pillars together, all 3 of the pillars create the foundation of Freemasonry. And then he climbs up to the 3rd pillar, which is the pillar of beauty. And according to Freemasonry, beauty without wisdom and strength is just appearance, right? It has no direction. It's just charm, distract, and seduction because it doesn't know what it's building. It just becomes an illusion instead of meaning, which is exactly what the Super Bowl halftime show is really about, right? And here's the kicker, Jay. When he's on the telephone poles, he's singing a song that literally translates into English called The Blackout. The song is about infrastructure collapse. And the telephone poles could also be looked at as like crosses, or that he's going to be crucified, which is in all white. And which brings me to the very end of the performance, when it seems like something kind of went wrong and he's being rushed off. Security is seen, and he's in the middle of he's in the middle of singing. Then he rips off his microphone mid-sentence, and then it just ends. Very strange, very weird performance.
I wonder what happened.
It could have been some kind of, I don't know, some kind of danger, some kind of somebody in the audience or something, or they were trying to avoid something. But it's very interesting, Jay, that we have this. I mean, he's from Puerto Rico. Okay, he's not actually from Mexico, but he is Spanish. It's an all Spanish speaking performance, and it's just really interesting how they would do this in the middle of all of these ICE raids and all of these ICE protests. Like, do they think that that's the smartest option to go with? And then you had TPUSA doing another halftime show with Kid Rock, which was an alternative.
Which was about as cringy as you can get. That was the cringiest thing ever. Erica comes out in her green. What level of grievances is she in right now with her sexy green outfit? But, I'm not going to say anything. But, yeah, it's a strange time we're in where we can see reality through, the internet, but they get to deny the reality. They can say, no, that's not what happened. I saw it. I don't know why you're saying that. And my new theory about all of this is that I've read recently that 60% of women and 30% of men are on extremely dangerous pharmaceuticals for their mental health, and Xanax and all these drugs. And and if you read about the side effects of these drugs that these people are taking, confusion, anger, all the things we're kind of witnessing right now in the world. So I don't know, but I'm sure the thing that occurred in 2021 has something to do with it also. But there's definitely altered humanity that lives among us right now, and we're all starting to see it, and it's a terrifying thing to look into. Like Nietzsche said, when you stare into the abyss, soon after that, the abyss begins staring into you. And that's kind of where we're at right now. The abyss is staring back at us, and we can see it clearly for what it is. And it's not a pretty thing to see.
Isn't green? Well, I know from watching House of the Dragon, which is a Game of Thrones thing, but the colors in George R.R. Martin's, which I don't know if it's correct to real reality, but green symbolizes the color of war. That when people wear green, because there was this part in the House of the Dragon where one of the Targaryens wore red and black throughout the entire thing, and then there was this really important gal meeting, and then she comes out in this all green dress, and then a war kicks off. It's a I don't know if that's real or not, but it seems like that it symbolizes war. I don't know.
I don't know. She's probably at war with Candace, if anything. But that whole episode, I started out, thinking as the way I do my research is I ask myself, what percentage do you believe what you're researching here before you start? And when I first saw the Charlie Kirk thing, I had about a 10% feeling that it was faked, but now I'm up about 40%. So it's gone up in the few months since the assassination. And, just from the behavior of everyone around him, the way that he was treated between the time he was shot and the time he was taken into the car, there's just something not right about the whole thing. And not feeling really good about it, not at all. And I think that I think that there's a key in there somewhere that's going to open up a door to a larger truth, but no one's opened it yet. No one's found the key and opened the door yet, but it's coming. I mean, it's only a matter of time. Just like, every day we find out more and more, and the more we find out, the stranger the whole thing gets. So, you know,
It really does. It does get really strange and interesting. And I think that we did that with JFKX, and we won't really get credit for that, but I'm pretty sure we just opened up the floodgates with JFKX.
well, what we did was we did something that had not really been like grounded into reality for the general public, and that is the real. So on the dark web, which I don't suggest anybody ever go to, because you'll probably be visited by the FBI. But on the dark web, um, there are companies that will basically, assist you in going missing. And they charge quite a bit of money, but they transfer your wealth over to hidden accounts and they move you secretly and they make it look like you died. And it happens all the time. The head of Enron was convicted. I don't know, he was going to go to jail for like 15 years. And he was going to start the serving his sentence on a Monday. And the Sunday night before he was going to go to jail, he had a heart attack and died. And I know for certain, because I've been told by high up people, that they have a drug that simulates a heart attack. And you look like you're dead for 3 days, even though you're not. Your heart just takes one beat a minute, and it's hardly it makes any sound at all. But so I believe this is quite pervasive in this world. I believe Michael Jackson may have faked his death, and several other people. And so what we did with JFKX is we made this a possibility, which hadn't been there before. And again, the reason that JFK may have done that in the film is that he was worried about the mob or the mafia coming after him and killing his family. Well, it's almost the same exact people that were threatening Charlie. And if your first threat doesn't work, that they're going to off you, then they say the next threat, which is the worst one, the one that haunts you. Okay, well, you want to see your kids go to college, right? And then that becomes the scary threat. And then you have to start thinking about how you're going to get out from that threat, from your family getting it. And then that raises the possibility of faking your own death. And by the way, Michael Jackson was beset by the same forces, the mob that owns the music industry. And I don't know if I ever told you this. I lived next to Neverland for 4 years, and my wife visited Neverland, and she saw Michael there. And he didn't talk to him or anything, but she went with a group of about 50 people. I knew some of the kids that were living there. These were really smart kids, and he wasn't molesting them. I'm sorry to say it. I know everybody wants Michael Jackson to be a molester, but we both came away with no. No, he's got kids there, that's for sure. But what he's doing with those kids doesn't appear to be sexual at all. It appears that he's protecting them, is what I think. And so I know it's a highly controversial view, but it was funny. We had about 500 acres and a lake right next to Neverland. And we used to see, one time we saw a black panther, another time we saw two alpacas, and there were all the animals that were escaping from his zoo. He had this big zoo. And as occasionally the animals would escape, and then we'd see Michael Jackson's guys running through our woods trying to retrieve some of the lost animals that got away. And I just, it was just something in my life that's very unusual, and I never really talked about it before.
Well, I think along with Michael Jackson, because I share those exact same sentiments. Same with Prince, which I'm not too sure if Prince faked it or not. It seems like Prince, they just took him out. He wanted the rights back to his music. And then they were like, they gave it to him. And then they're like, all right, well, you want to see how big and bad you are? We'll just kill you. Which is that is kind of the go-to thing for a lot of people. Have you ever heard of the Invention Secrecy Act?
Yeah, 1951.
If the patent is considered a threat to national security. Now, what is considered a threat to national security? Well, it's whatever the fuck the government says that it is, right? The Invention Security Act can block your patent, your invention. It becomes classified. You can't legally share it with anyone, and you can't legally build your own invention, even though you were the one that filed the patent. Okay. So, and they kill you. Okay. They raid your house, steal your invention anyway. No wonder we're still working with the same shit that we've been working with for decades, Jake, because every single time someone comes up with something that will revolutionize our way of life, they get murdered by the government. Is stolen.
Stanley Meyer invented a car that ran on water, and then he was at dinner with his investors, and he had a glass of wine and fell over and he started puking, and then he told his buddy that he'd been poisoned. Eric Dollard invented free energy, and he ran out of his offices in California, and they were raided actually, and by the feds. And he was living, one of the most brilliant people alive, was living out of his car in Joshua Tree Park in California, because and I don't think he ever recovered from the disaster. And the guy that ran Energy Magazine, Gene Maloff, was a friend of mine. He the whole entire magazine was financed by a friend of mine also. And he was in his house watching TV one night, and somebody broke in his house and shot him and killed him. And the guy was never found. And so, yeah, it's really dangerous. And it definitely has to do with anything that is advancing the energy, especially free energy. That's just not allowed. I could really and truly describe to you right now how to make a free energy device that costs you about $200, but I don't dare. I just can't do it, And our good friend Ken Schwartz, he's got a free energy thing going too, and I'm telling him, be careful, dude. He's doing it the right way. He's letting it out in a million different ways so they can't bottle it up. But still, it's a dangerous world when it comes to free energy. But we have to get free energy because there's not enough energy. And they're not building any nuclear power plants. So I don't know where we're going to get all of our energy for the future. So we have to start thinking that what's going to happen is it's going to be somebody in Korea or Asia somewhere that's going to do it where there's no trouble from the United States. And the United States government is falling apart rather quickly. So I don't know how much longer they're going to be able to guard the gate. And once everybody realizes that the gates have been left unguarded, then everybody's going to start doing it. So I think that's where we're headed. Um, it's going to be free energy. And what happens when you combine free energy with AI printers and I know with 3D printers and AI. When those three things are combined, what happens? Well, your garage is now a production center for whatever you want, right? And you can design it with the AI and print anything you want with the 3D printer. And so we're very soon going to have extremely exotic stuff happening, and there's not going to be any way to bottle it up. And I think that they know that. They're trying to take methods right now to get ahead of the game, but the game is now outracing everyone. So I don't know where we're headed.
It's just always baffled me, Jay, and now I know why, is because of this Secrecy Act that was put into place in 1951, where they just, when you file a patent, they just put a whole secrecy banner over it and make it to where you can't do anything with the patent, even though it's a completely functional and working patent. That is the reason why we're still, I mean, why are we still using the same car engine? You're telling me since the time that a car engine was very first made, it's been the same? We haven't figured out how to get 100 miles to a gallon yet? Or 150 miles to a gallon?
Yeah. No, there's like no reason to even be spending money on gasoline. There's no reason to even have roads anymore. I mean, they have flying machines that can fly with just using free energy. That's the Navy has them. And there's guys in the Navy that want them to release it too. And maybe they will. The Navy, the way that the Navy releases their inventions is they create front companies, and that front company acts like it invented it, right? Then they have to give a lot of that money that they get back to the Navy as part of the deal. I had a good friend who was in the Navy, and he got out and started making all these incredible inventions for shipping. And I knew him, and he really wasn't qualified to make these inventions. And I was always very curious about it. He made a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars. And then he died, and his kids got nothing. So, that's the way it goes. And over and over and over. And, but we're working on it. Dang it, we're working on it. We're trying to get this stuff out. And
it just should strike everybody as odd that it seems like nothing has progressed in our reality besides our electronics.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Like that's it.
From the year 400, when Rome fell, and to you go 1,000 years later to the year 1400, the boats that the Portuguese and the Spanish used to get across the Atlantic to America were the same exact technology that they had in 400. There was no advancements. Nothing had advanced. The same ropes, same sails, same mass, same everything. The Vikings added a couple of wrinkles with their boats, but no, even those were still pretty much the same. And so you see this like weird time in history, what they call the Dark Ages, where nothing happens. There's no inventions. There's no new weapons invented. There's no new ways of farming invented. There's nothing is invented from 400 to 1400. And even when you start examining, this is what I wanted to get into with the show, even when you start examining like popes, right? Like the Pope, the reign of popes from in that time period up until about 900, there's really scant records of everything. And then finally, around 1000 with Pope Sylvester II, we start actually finding a line of popes that we can follow. And so everything is like very obscure, and it appeared like there's almost a series of resets every 400 years or so. It appears with little minor resets inside the major resets. And So like 1000 appears to be a reset, 1400. Um, then we go through the mini ice age, and then we get to what I think is the last really important reset. We're going through a reset right now, but the last really important reset happened in the early 1800s, and we know them as the the Napoleonic Wars and the War of 1812 here in America. And they both happened at the same time, 1812 to 1815 or so. And these wars are odd and strange because, first off, Napoleon raises a 650,000 man army in 1800. I don't know what the population of Europe was then, but that's going to be a large chunk of the whole entire population. And these guys, they race from Vienna across Strasbourg and into Russia with the intention of overthrowing the Tsar because for whatever reason. And what the 650,000 men marching through Europe did was it destroyed entire villages and little enclaves of people, and just by marching through. They weren't killing them. They were taking all the food, all the cows, all the pigs, everything. They're eating up the entire countryside as they moved through this. And then when they got to Russia, the Russians wouldn't stand and fight them. So the Russians just retreated. And so Napoleon, driving his way towards Moscow, he finally faces the Russians outside Moscow and loses like 100,000 men in this battle, both sides. And by the time he gets to Russia, if he gets to Moscow, his 650,000 men are now like 150,000. So 500,000 died on this campaign. And then he gets to Moscow and they've abandoned Moscow. The Russians, they're not going to fight him. And he sits there waiting for someone to come, try to make a treaty with him, and no one comes. And then the Russians start burning down Moscow to try to burn down Napoleon. And then he goes through a horrible winter, losing more and more guys. And then he tries to escape in the springtime. And then the Russians finally take him out, and his beleaguered army take him out. But what the Russians did when they were retreating was they destroyed every village, everything, killed all the animals, chopped down all the trees, made sure that Napoleon had nothing. Wherever he went, it was gone. And so if you look at maps of the exact places where Napoleon went from Europe into Moscow, you look at maps from say 1750, you'll see hundreds of these little towns and villages all through this area. Then you look at maps that say 1850, and they're all gone. They're all missing. They're all gone. And so you have to ask yourself, well, what were these villages and stuff? And then you find out that they were autonomous, self-sufficient, had their own law and order, their own customs, their own way of doing things. They didn't trust outside people. They didn't trust authority, right? And then what happens after they're wiped out? You've got a whole group of people that are just following whatever the larger government is dictating. That they need the larger government now because they're no longer self-sufficient. They're no longer autonomous. And that happened in America too. And the British burned the Library of Congress, destroying all the records of America's founding. So now we have no more records of what exactly how these laws were passed and for what reason. And that's very convenient, by the way. And the British also seem to be taking out strongholds in New England and that were in West Virginia that were these resilient, you maybe call them hillbillies sort of, but there were these super resilient people that worked their butts off, grew all their own food, raised all their animals, knew weapons like no tomorrow, and didn't like authority. And so when they burned down Washington, D.C. With the Library of Congress, the British, what that did was that formed a kind of for the first time in American history, it formed a kind of a patriotism towards the federal government, which we didn't have before, right? Because they burned it down. And what I'm saying to you is that I don't think there were any. I think there was a prearranged agreement between the Russians and Napoleon. There was a prearranged agreement between the British and the Americans that that we were going to make it look like there was a war, but what it really was a cleaning up of the population to make a more more of a nation building population than autonomous, self-sufficient. And who knows what kind of knowledge got wiped out in this ordeal, right? Different ways of doing things, different ways of creating things, different ways of thinking. And I think that was the point. I think the point is to come out the other side with a population that all thinks exactly the same, dictated by the people on top. And that's where we were. And I think that also the great fires that swept across America in the 1800s were also part of this. So, the Great Fire of 1871 in Chicago. Well, what was Chicago at that time? Chicago was a group of incredibly strong, resilient people who were working in the meat packing plants and unloading ships coming down Lake Michigan, and really resilient people and pioneers, their first arrivals and all that. And they got wiped out by the 1871 fire. And then that population got replaced by a whole new group of people that were now part of this population change that happened a few years earlier. I believe that's what was going on all across the United States. The pioneers, the resilient people would found a city like Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, coming from the East and being very strong people, very stubborn people. They built this thing. They're really proud of it. And then it's like in all organizations, the people that found the organizations, the creative people, they get wiped out after a few years when the management class comes in and says, "You're too wild, you're too crazy, we got to get rid of you." And then they get rid of you. It happens in corporations all the time. In my career, I was a startup expert. I would be the guy that would start up with 5 or 6 other people with corporations. I started like 4 corporations in my life. Now, all of them became successful too, and it happened every time. We would start. It wasn't even work for us. We would work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, and having the time of our life because we were creating this company. We were the only ones there. We're all working together, all having a great time, and yeah, we were wild and crazy and all that. And then slowly the management class gets hired, and they begin surrounding you, and then they begin getting rid of you slowly. And they think that they can take it over, and they usually can't. And that's what happened here. The people that were creative and resilient and self-sufficient and autonomous are the people that founded all the cities in the West. And when I say West, I mean like west of New England, right? All of that, Ohio Valley and all of that. And then they had to be wiped out. And so a new class could take over that would be more adherent to the governing body of the country, which was now the federal government, which the first people would have never allowed the federal government to have any power, to be honest with you. It all had to be local. And we're at now another great reset right now. That's why the world is so weird to us, because we're in the middle of a great reset, and they're going to use AI to do it. And AI is going to rewrite history, and you're not going to be able to find history. Just like all the books that burned from 1700 to 1850, literally hundreds of libraries were burned. Sometimes only the library was burned, not any of the surrounding buildings. Monasteries were the keepers of all the books. If you try to, I used to search for rare books for a wealthy friend of mine. And I remember I would go to Europe, mostly books on alchemy. And I would go to Europe looking for these books, usually Amsterdam or France. And I could never find the actual book, the original book. So if a book came out in 1725 on alchemy, and I was assigned to go get that book, I could only find copies of it. I couldn't actually find the book itself. It seemed to be missing. And then I began realizing what happened is that the wealthy people began going through libraries and finding the good books and stealing them or buying them and putting them in their own private collections. And then they really didn't care what happened to the rest of the books. And so when you start looking back at records, and in my research on the Cross of Henday, I had to go back and look at records in France because I was looking for certain people from a long time ago. You find that the records are just not there. They're just not there. And, you can't find dates in graveyards in Europe before 1500. There's no graves that are before 1500. It's very strange. And, but, you can find a lot of dead bodies in the labyrinth under Paris, which was filled with dead people. So, there's something very strange about it all. And I have to say, Nick Bostrom, the great Swedish English physicist, he wrote a book a few years ago on AI, and it basically, is this a simulation that we're living in? And he made a lot of really good arguments for why we're living in a simulation. And then at the very end of his argument, he began saying, well, how could we figure out if we're in a simulation? So I'm now perking up and going, yeah, how can we find out? And he said, well, resources are always limited. So the programmers, whatever they're using, are going to have limited disk space or whatever it is they're using for saving. So they're going to have to spend more of their program time on the present and the future, and then not so much on the past, because they just don't have that much resources to spend a lot of time recreating the past. So if you go and you look in the past, this is Nick Bostrom talking. If you go and you look in the past and you see a lot of anomalies, then that's probably a sign we're in a simulation because they didn't finish the programming. Well, I like, okay. So immediately I began looking into anomalous things that happened in the past to see if there were a lot of them. And, I started watching channels like Autodidactic and other channels and all that. And I'm like, wow, all you find is anomalies in the past. Just strange stuff that can't be explained. I mean, really strange stuff. I've seen a photograph from like 1880 in the Mojave Desert in California of a dilapidated Gothic cathedral falling apart in the desert with a couple of Spanish guys like standing there around it, right? It was clear you could see that it was once a glorious Gothic cathedral, and now it's in ruins in 1880 in the desert of California. You're like, wait a minute. It takes 300 years to build a Gothic cathedral. It takes probably 500 years for it to fall apart. When was this thing built? Then I got a set of magazines from 1868, and they're called American Archaeological something. And it was just little pamphlets, right? They came out every month for like 3 years. And the one issue starts out an essay that says, little did we realize when we came here from Europe hundreds of years ago that this land had temples that rivaled those of Egypt. It had buildings that rivaled those of Europe, that there was majestic cities and all this. I'm like reading this going, wait a minute, this is 1868? This guy's saying this, right? So it ain't what it seems, is what I'm saying. And I don't think we'll ever piece it together, to be honest with you, because it would appear to me that a governing body was formed at the beginning of the 1800s financed, well financed, and that this governing body worldwide said we're going to homogenize the world. We're going to take all these hundreds of villages that are everywhere, and we're going to make them into nation states, and that's what they did. And very similar to what Mussolini did in Italy, pre like 1920s. He took all the little villages all over Italy, made them all part of Italy. And, he's a fascist. That's what they call him for doing it, and it is fascism to force people into lifestyles that they don't want and to destroy them if they refuse to join your lifestyle. And this is happening again right now. And like I said, they're using AI to accomplish it. AI is going to rewrite everything. And I don't even know where that's.
If there was all these buildings here, though, why would we just not continue to use the buildings? Like if you don't have a house and you stumble across the house and no one's inside of the house, that's the thing too. Is like, well, if that's true, then where did the people go? And why did they abandon their homes and abandon their buildings? And that's an assumption that nobody was in them. That's what we're working with the possibility that all of these structures and all of these places were just abandoned. But what if they weren't? What if there were actual people inside of them, and then that would, or around them, or people that were still in these villages? That would make sense, because then you would have to go to war with those people. You would have to kill those people, and then in the middle of killing them, you would probably then try and destroy their property, destroy their houses, tear
down. They burned everything down.
Yeah.
That was the fire is the devil's only friend, and they burned everything down. That's what they did in America. That's what Sherman did, going from D.C. to Georgia. He destroyed every single thing in his path. Everything. Dug up the railroad lines, burned everything, burned every farm, burned every ranch, killed all the animals. That's what happened. It happened here in this country in 1864. So it is a way of life, actually. And again, I think the great fires in America, which have gone away, by the way, strangely enough, were started for the same reasons. You have to move out populations and move in new populations, ones that are more compliant, because pioneers are just not, they're by their very nature, they're not going to be compliant. They're going to be very stubborn. They're going to have a lot of knowledge, a lot of common knowledge, and they claimed the land the first, and so they're not going to give it up easy. So you have to find new ways, devious ways to get rid of them all. And where do the 300,000 orphans on the orphan trains come from?
That's a good question.
Where's their parents? What's exactly going on here, and why are they being going out into the Midwest to basically be slaves on farms? And is this agreement between somebody and the farmer who takes the kids in? And and that history is all scant. We don't know. Then there's a strange thing with the kids that are grown in the Cabbage Patch Kids. All through the 1800s were these postcards of Cabbage Patch Kids, and it's like, you're growing kids in a cabbage patch, and then and that's exactly happening at the same time that the orphan trains are going, and then what exactly is going on here? You go to the World's Fairs all across America, again, at the same time period, and there's hundreds of babies in incubators out in the hot sun. It's like, that's not very healthy. And, why are you so interested in advertising incubators? What is this? So, we don't know. And the more you look, the more mysterious it all gets, until you wonder, is this a simulation?
Well, and the people there too were reportedly didn't really know what a kid was. Like, they were like shocked by what a baby even was, which just adds more mystery to the entire thing. Like, it doesn't make any sense. But what is really interesting is if if you get rid of the people that know how to do certain things, then that information inevitably gets lost forever. If you kill all the people that know how to do things, then you no longer know how to do that thing that they knew how to do. And so this is how ancient societies and ancient cultures and I mean, just in 2 to 3 generations in the United States, people have forgotten what their grandparents did. Okay, so you're telling me for thousands of years, people haven't forgotten about all this stuff, especially when if you just wipe out the people that, all right, I'm going to put it in more modern terms that might make more sense to the people listening. Let's say that we just got rid of all the people that knows how to make a phone. We Everybody that knows how to make a phone and all the compartments of how to make a phone just automatically drops dead. Okay. And let's say that we don't have any means to know how to do that. Let's say the internet doesn't exist. Okay. Nobody's going to know how this works. And no one is going to be able to duplicate it or replicate it because everybody that knows how is dead. So, I mean, that just shows you how a lot of this stuff works. I think that's the same case with the pyramids. I think that an ancient civilization had to have built them, and then all of those people died, and the knowledge of how it was built died along with them.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It's almost like well, you could be explained through the Yuga system from the Vedic tradition, and that is that as we've been in the Kali Yuga now, all the way up until the time period that I'm talking about, around 1800 is when the Kali Yuga ended and the Dwapara Yuga began. And you can see the kind of the difference in humanity before 1800 and after. We could travel more, we had more ability to do things. The printing press was giving us books and information, but there does seem to be a force that stupefies humanity, and the burning of the books. Why in the world would you want to burn books? Because you don't want knowledge to be advanced. And so there seems to be like a double-edged sword. You're getting rid of knowledgeable populations and then getting rid of all the access to knowledge that the general population should have. And so when the internet came, especially the last 10 years, we began seeing all these holes in history. A lot of people saw them and couldn't understand why there were all these holes. And uh, and that is because we have access to the knowledge of the internet. And so the holes become more apparent. We can see things that shouldn't be that are, and things that shouldn't be, and we don't even know, what to make of it. So people that look into history, um, alternative history, are completely baffled by what they see. They don't know how a city could have gotten built so quickly, like San Francisco. It's got like 150 people, and when it's founded in 1849, and 20 years later, there's 800, 900 buildings built, nice ones too, cathedrals. I have a book of 1878 San Francisco photographs. A photographer went there, took about 50 photographs, and this is before the fire. And there's 3 cathedrals in San Francisco at the time. There's all the streets are filled with buildings, but strangely enough, there's no horse poop, no horses, no people. It's just really a strange thing. And when you realize it takes at least 100 and 200 years to build a cathedral, and they didn't have any cathedrals in 1849, yet by 1878, they've got 3. And, you're like, well, okay. And then there's, the strange thing of the explorer, going to forget his name, the British explorer, he's coming up the coast for the first time in California, and he doesn't go into the bay. He just sails right by it. It's like, oh, wait a minute. That's strange. Why wouldn't you want to explore this bay? It's so obvious that you got an opening, it's a great port, bays are great ports, yet he just skips right by it. And so you got to wonder what's going on. You really do. And San Francisco is actually the most notable example of a city really almost appearing out of nothing and just instantaneously being there, with almost no explanation. Okay, so the gold rush is in 1849, and so a lot of miners came from the East Coast to San Francisco. There's no trains, so they had to go by boat around the Cape in southern South America. Must have been a hell of a trip, and so they gave. But they didn't come here to build buildings and cathedrals. They came there to mine gold. So the Chinese weren't there yet. They didn't get there until 1864 to build the railroads, the Union Pacific. So how did all these buildings get built, and who designed it? And there's no records either. There's no records. It all got burned up in the San Francisco fire in 1905. And this is a very typical thing for this country, for a community to have a fire in the place where their records are kept, whether it's the Library of Congress or the Moscow Library, which got burned in 1814. It was all of the Kremlin's history in there. All the Tartarian history is in that library. It all got burned. And then, and also, by the way, after 1815, all the maps of the world removed Tartaria from the maps. They were no longer on the maps anymore. Before, they were all over the map. Tartaria was, which is in China and Russia. But after this purge, as I call it, Tartaria is no longer on the maps. In fact, the only reason that we know about Tartaria really is Putin released a bunch of secret maps in 2013. That's what started the Tartaria rage, because Putin released 15 maps from ancient Russia showing in detail what Tartaria was. And that's when everyone started going crazy about Tartaria. And so why did Putin do that? And I think it's obvious why he did it, because he wants to show that the history we're being fed is a bunch of BS.
Well, that's around the area where Tartaria was supposedly at, right? Was around Russia, correct?
Yeah, Russia and Mongolia, and all the way to the Chinese Wall. The Great Wall of China. No one really knows who built it, but the guard turrets. There's little turrets for the guard to get out of the rain, right? Are not on the Chinese side of the wall. They're on the invader side of the wall. Why would you do that? Why would you put your guard on the China side of the wall where he's safe, instead of being on the other side? So it's very likely that the Great Wall of China was built to keep the Chinese out of Tartaria. Yeah, and so the Great Wall of China is as long as the United States, the continental United States. Did you know that?
If you stretched it out?
If you stretched it out, it'd be 2,500 miles long.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's a big wall. Somebody with a lot of resources had to do it. And so the whole thing gets more and more curious. And again,
I think that's what a lot of the star forts were as well, was to keep people out. Not to hold people in, but to keep people out. I don't know.
Well, I mean, ostensibly they say it was built for cannonballs to bounce off of, but I don't know about that. Seems too elaborate to build, but the geometry, the sacred geometry in these star forts, wild and crazy, man. If you know your esoteric symbolism, and you look at the star fort from above, taken by a drone or whatever, it's like, wait a minute, somebody knows what they're doing here. And just like your Super Bowl thing, the black cube of Saturn and coming down, and um, Stanley Kubrick's Black Monolith, which is on its way to Saturn, in the book anyway. And so these things are all tied together in this weird, crazy cult religion that we don't really understand. And it seems to be behind all these resets. And it seems to be what I think it is I think it's a group of survivors from the catastrophe from 12,000 years ago. And they survived with all of their technologies, whatever those technologies were. Definitely had flying craft and probably free energy. And they took a place somewhere on Earth. I don't know where. I'd say probably if I was them, it'd be an island in the South Pacific somewhere, and keep it off the maps, keep it off the trade routes, keep everybody away from it. And they've been running the world ever since. And they do resets. They decide that, every few hundred years, people begin figuring out that they exist, and even begin searching for them. And then they have to end the civilization and start all over again. And I believe that, well, I know that the German with the little short mustache, I know that he was obsessed with this. There were a series of books by Bulwer Lytton at the time about this group of people that lived far away from the rest of humanity and controlled us. And then there's a Jacques Vallée's Messengers of Deception book, which is one of the greatest books ever written. And he postulates that there has to be, that they aren't aliens that are bugging us. It's got to be a group of advanced humans living somewhere on this planet who are directing things, directing the 13 families that rule the world. And in the end, Occam's razor, I'm going with that.
That it is a possibility that the Earth is way bigger than what we believe that it is. And I think that that is a possibility that other civilization could live over there. I don't know.
Yeah, there could be a big island in the South Pacific that no one knows about because you don't travel. There's certain routes that boats go, right? Certain routes that planes go, right? They don't go over wide areas. They can't afford the fuel to go over long, wide areas of the ocean. It would cost you a fortune to take a boat out into the South Pacific because there's nowhere to fuel, right? So, but believe it or not, I would gravitate towards more. No, this is going to sound kind of wild. Towards the hollow Earth, to be honest with you. Everything in the world is a torus. Atoms are toruses. Suns are toruses. Solar systems are toruses. Galaxies are torus systems. So why wouldn't the Earth be a torus system? And again, you start trying to look at any kind of imagery from the North or South Pole, it's pretty friggin' difficult to find. And there is a lot of activity at the South Pole, especially. And the other thing that I do is what you do is you Google image, say Venus, North Pole, Venus, South Pole, Saturn, North Pole, Saturn, South Pole, Jupiter, North Pole, so Mars, North Pole, Mars, South. And you find that every frigging pole on every planet is weird, just something weird up there. And almost like they're covering something up. And so I would probably go with that more than anything else. And if that was so, then that means that there's land as big as the Earth still undiscovered. And, there's a lot of weird stories of fishermen falling into the hole at the North Pole, Norwegian fishermen going through. There's the story of the guy in the Mammoth Caves in Kentucky finding an opening and going all the way down and finding a whole world. There's the green children in England who showed up one day in the 1500s. They had green skin, and they told them that they came through a cave from under the earth, and one of them died. They couldn't take the food or the sunlight or something. The other one lived. These stories are all over the place, and I don't think we should take them lightly. I think that there's there's a lot of things under the earth that we don't know about.
Admiral Byrd. I don't know how much of that story.
I don't know if that's true or not, but here's the thing. You know how when you open your refrigerator on a hot day and all that steam comes out, right? From your freezer, I mean. You open up your freezer on a really hot day and all the steam comes out. That's because the cold and the heat are meeting each other, right? And causing a reaction. So if there was an opening at the North Pole or the South Pole or both, then it would be in perpetual clouds, all right? Because the heat hitting the cold air, hitting the warm air from inside the earth would be perpetually cloudy, and the North Pole is perpetually cloudy. That's why you never can get a good photograph of it, because it's just covered in clouds all the time. And not so much Antarctica, but you can't get there. You can't fly over Antarctica. It's impossible. I tried. It's impossible. I tried to book a flight from Australia to South Africa to go over Antarctica, and nobody will do it. No matter how much I give them, no one will do it. And I've been told that it's a very dangerous flight, so I probably don't want to take it. But so, you can't. And the same thing is true when there is a flight that goes over the North Pole, but it goes over at night. It's like, what good's that going to do you? So anyway, I do give a little bit of credence to it, to the hollow earth. And it wouldn't surprise me, because it'd be much safer inside the earth than it is out here in the open.
Absolutely. Can you let people know about your, how far along are you with your movie? Well, not your movie, but your series that you're working on.
My series, The Invisible Universe, Orbs, Plasma, and the Supernatural World. The first episode is done. I've got 6 more to do. I've been contacted by a very, very upscale literary agent from New York who wants to represent me, writing a book about my favorite filmmaker, the GOAT, Stanley Kubrick, and working on the script for JFK X2. And so, yeah, I'm a busy guy. I'm probably the busiest guy my age that I know. So I'm just really going. And how's your project going?
It's going really well. Working hard on it. I just worked for like 4 days on 6 minutes of footage. You know how that goes.
Oh, oh my God. Yeah, editing is a mind-blowing adventure, and like trying to get out of a swampy quagmire at the same time. And it's just one problem solving after another, constantly, all day long.
That's what I love about it. I love the problem solving aspect and the telling a story through visual aspects. It just gets daunting after a while when you've been working on for something for so long. You're like, is this ever going to be? Am I ever going to get through with this? But it's working good. I'm planning on getting to Colorado to film up the rest of it here, hopefully at the end of this month, and then it'll be go time.
Well, it's beautiful here right now. Blue skies every day. It's like 60 degrees out here at 8,000 feet. Whole rest of the country's getting killed, and we're like living in paradise here.
Well, can you let people know where to find you online, plug your channel, where they can purchase?
Reality Check is my YouTube channel, jweidner.com. My free articles, my films, my 25 plus films are up on Amazon and Gaia.com.